Hi there, everyone. My name is Tom Del Giudice, and I wanted to share with you one of the biggest pain points that I see which is how to stop binging at night. Now, I see this in the community online where people come into our program. It's the biggest thing that I see, and it's the most questions that I get asked, specifically around, Tom, how do I stop binging at night? Just a bit of context. As of today, next month I will be 7 years where I will have not binged once uh, at nighttime. And no, not at all, in fact, but specifically at nighttime because it's a big trigger. 10 years ago, I was chronically binging at night, like constantly. And I was stuck in a loop and in a cycle that no matter what I did at that time, it got worse. The binges got worse. They got more full on. So today I'm going to give you the 7 key ideas and the strategy really behind how to actually go about doing this so that you can rack up the days, not binge at night, and for it to be completely removed going forward. Again, this is what I teach. These are principles and ideas that I've taken upon into my life that has allowed me to be almost 7 years now free from binging at night. So yeah, enjoy the video. So the first one is, and it's a huge one. A lot of people don't. A lot of people miss this point, especially when transitioning onto a cleaner diet, is restricting calories. A lot of people restrict way too many calories, and this leads to the nighttime binges really taking effect. So an example of this is when I first started and transitioned to being vegan and raw vegan, I was and with not even knowing it, I was restricting way too many calories. Now, when you go from when you go from a point where you're having like 3,000, 4,000 calories, and you go to like 2,000 or 2,200, and the foods are cleaner, inevitably your body is going to respond, and it's going to respond with a lot of noise and cravings and intense cravings. Reason for this is because if you're restricting too much, not only is the body responding that way, but it is genuinely hungry. I do not recommend for people that are transitioning and just in general, like have an idea. There's this calculator that I've used and I recommend. It's called the TDEE calculator. So if you look up online and you go into that calculator, you type in your height, your body weight, and how physically active you are, you will see specifically the the amount of calories, the recommended amount of calories you should be consuming in a day. Naturally, when you are going raw vegan or transitioning to a cleaner vegan, more plant-based lifestyle, there must be a level of awareness when it comes to calories. And especially if we've come from cooked foods, heavy foods, that element, the calories are going to be totally different. And the intake has to be a lot more generally, because if you have a pound of vegetables and you have a pound of, say, rice in that, it's going to be very different. It's going to be very, very different. So it's really important to get across how many calories you're having, and very important not to be restricting those when transitioning. Because transitioning of itself is enough of a battle, and or can definitely be. So yeah, the number one thing, restricting calories, have an understanding of how much calorie intake you need. This is going to be different to every single individual. So the calories that I have in a given day, and especially with the calories that I needed at the beginning of my journey compared to now, are also very different. Is also depending on how physically active I am. So there's a lot of moving parts. So use that calculator, get very specific with how many calories, and then meet that. It doesn't need to be a controlling thing where, oh, if I don't get this many calories in, I'm going to end up binging. Like, it's a guide of how many calories you need. And if you're falling well below, then you just got to pick it up and have foods, have more food. So if you're raw, have more avocados, soaked and activated nuts and seeds. Have more fruit, bananas, dates. Like, these things are going to help with bumping up the calories. So that is one thing. It's a very important thing. I see way too many people do this, especially when transitioning to a raw vegan lifestyle, and it leads to those binges. Because if you're restricting too many calories, inevitably it's going to come at night, and it is going to be very full on. And it was my experience. That's why I know this. I did this for so many years, trying to transition, and yeah, it just ended up being a nightmare. So have sufficient calories. The second point is the transition. So and specifically what do I mean, the transition being way too intense. So what do I mean by this? When you are, depending on where you're coming from, and specifically where you're transitioning to, is going to depend on how gracefully you are in that transition. So what do I mean by that? When I was out of control with my food, and I was binging every single night, and then there was a night I didn't binge, and then I got even worse. I was having like meats and takeaway and pasta. Like, I consume anything and everything, and most of it came from takeaway food. So if I'm going from there and I am wanting to become raw vegan, and the next day, which is what I did countless times, I go raw vegan, what is going to happen for majority of people, and it happened to me, is from here to here, it's way too intense. And especially if you're restricting calories, it's very intense. So the key is to find again, I want to be very clear. This specifically applies for people that have struggled with binging at night over and over and over again. Not saying you cannot go from a point of here directly to here. I know many people that have done that, and have done that seemingly overnight, and have done that in a quicker progression. Cool. I'm not speaking to you. The people that I'm speaking to are the ones specifically that cannot stop binging at night, and like me, continue to binge and was totally out of control with it. And emotionally it affected them. So if you're going from point A to point B, point A being very unclean food, binging food, to raw vegan, if that's a transition you're making, just like that, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be way too harsh. And I say that from experience because I spent years in a cycle of trying to do that, trying to go from here to here. So then what do you do instead? What I explain to people is, if you're going from here, try and be vegan. Okay? And we're not talking, again, like fast food vegan. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking like home cooked meals, raw meals included in that as well. So if you're trying to be vegan and you're coming from here, binging all the time on all different types of foods, okay, the middle ground to that is to then be vegan and all cooking to be at home and all preparing of food to be at home. That's it. So try and do that. Because if you cannot do that, there is no way you're going to be able to do this. If you're trying to fast and do an extended fast, the likelihood of you not being able to achieve being vegan or being raw vegan or whatever that looks like for you, it's just not going to be able to happen. And that was my experience, my direct experience for so many years, and the experience of the people that I help and I coach all the time. So you've got to find some middle ground. And that middle ground doesn't have to be forever. Yeah. It just has to be for a period in time. For me, that was 3 months. So I went from the way I was eating to being, it was about 70, 30, 60, 40, that I was vegan 30%, cooked vegan that is, and raw 70%. That was the middle ground. And that's why you've got to have grace when it comes to this process. Because if you're trying to transition too hard like that, it's gonna have problems when it's at night. When that's coming up at night, you're going to be having issues, because if the transition is too intense, the noise in your mind and the thinking of food and the cravings around food are going to be very, very intense, and it's going to really affect that process. So that is the transition at night. And when you do that, have foods that are transitional foods. So an example of this would be, I used to have soup and have a lot of vegetables in the soup. It's one thing that I did at night, and I had a real hearty, heavy soup. That was a transitional food for me. I wasn't able to go, like I explained, from here to here. So that was a transitional meal for me. Potatoes, another one. Sweet potatoes, another one. Like, these are transitional foods. Depending on what your goal is, it's going to depend on what that transition looks like. That is absolutely what I would say in that area. So the third thing is handling emotions during the day. When we wake up, okay, and we start the day, there's going to be a lot of things that are coming up for us. And it might be fear, it might be anger, or we might start the day and things are okay. Depending on what happened the previous day and how we potentially slept, let's just say we start the day clean. Well, we have things through the day, family troubles, work stress, potential, maybe you've just got out of a relationship, maybe money is an issue at that time and you're thinking about that. Maybe you're in fear of something that you've done. Maybe there's a secret that you haven't talked to someone, trusted person with, that's been weighing on you. That there's different things that can happen that affects your emotions throughout the day. And so I'll explain. What used to happen to me is I had a lot of stuff in the background, fears, secrets. I was angry a lot of the time with certain things. I had a very low self-esteem. There were a lot of things in the background that was going on for me that, when brought into the day, something would happen and I would get overwhelmed with that. And the emotional feel, it's an emotional, overwhelming feeling. Now, why that's an issue when it comes to binging at night? First thing is, if you are emotionally overwhelmed, when it comes to the end of the day, you are going, if you've had a pattern of binge eating at night, that is going to be the default mechanism. You are going to want to binge. You're going to want to find some comfort. This is what I did for years. Like, this was a constant thing. Something would happen. I would get overwhelmed with emotion. And when it came to night, I would be out of control with the food that I was having, and I would binge. So then what do you do with that? So, okay, let's say I understand that. I understand I need to be more on top of my emotions. Well, how do I do that? The first thing is addressing what it is that's underneath that layer. What is that? What is going on? So an example of this is, for me, one of the things that was going on for me is I had a really low self-esteem, very low self-esteem. From all the years of the binging and the many things that were going on in my life, and the trajectory that I kept on going down, and especially being beaten by this uncontrollable addiction to food, it just beat me over the years. So my confidence and my self-esteem, more importantly, my self-esteem, was very low. So one of the things that when I noticed that I've got a very low self-esteem, and when things come up that tests that for me and makes me feel lesser than, that is a trigger for me to binge. So one of the things I did to build that is I did esteemable acts. So if I have a low self-esteem and I need to build that, one of the ways to go about that is you do esteemable acts, which is doing good things for other people. So I would volunteer and help others, and I would be the one to ask how my family were going. I would be a little bit more helpful in the workplace and a little bit more helpful to when I was in my job in banking, the clients that I would help. And I would do this to, one, be helpful, but two, to build up my self-esteem so I felt better about myself. Because I started addressing that layer, the underneath layer, I started to not feel that when I was in a situation where my self-esteem was tested, or I had a really bad thought about my self-worth, then I would be able to correct that and it wouldn't happen. So there's things that come up, like secrets that come up, there's fears. And now, an example of that, I'm not saying you need to be helping everyone. There's an element of selfishness that has to come in when dealing with an addiction to food, a craving to food, an uncontrollable desire and binge of food. So don't take that as, okay, that is the one solution to be doing now. I'm just going to be helping others. No, that's just something that I noticed continually, that when I started to addressing it, I fixed it. So different fears can come up. You're going to know what they are and what comes up. Maybe you've just gone through a breakup. Yeah. This happened to me multiple times. Broke up with my ex, and when I thought about that relationship, my thinking and my emotions were heightened. And so I had to seek help about that. And when I sought help through that area, it started to calm the thoughts and the emotions that I was feeling when transitioning. So very important. The next one I've got here, this is very good. So to have a nightly routine, to have some structure in place, because we have a morning routine. Yeah, a lot of us do anyway. Some maybe not as resourceful as others. But if you have a morning routine, you get up, you shower, maybe you pray, maybe you exercise. So this is the morning routine, and this is what sets you up for the day. Yeah? Well, when you get it tonight, if you don't have any structure at all for when you're coming to that point, then it's only inevitably going to become an issue when you're binging at night. Because if there's less structure there, if there's less focused, especially if you've had a big day, something's come up at work or something's come up generally in life, to have something that you can lean into that's resourceful, like a routine at night, and that might be for you listening to some music. Another thing might be reviewing your day. Another thing might be, which reviewing your day is definitely what I do. Another is going to bed at a certain time. It's another thing. Switching off social media, switching off your phone is another thing. So it doesn't have to be broken down 15 minutes complex. Like, it just has to be a few things that keep some structure at night. Because if you're binging, there's an element that is out of control there, that's getting the best of you. So it only then makes sense if you have a morning routine to also then have a night routine, specifically because you're going through this issue and you cannot stop binging at night. And that is going to alleviate something. It's going to bring a bit more certainty. It is also going to bring some comfort to the situation too, because if you're doing this consistently every night, and we don't have to be perfect here, but if you're consistently stacking up good nightly routine, good nightly routine, good nightly routine, that is only going to compound. So this is something that I did right at the beginning, because I noticed, hey, my morning routine is quite solid, and rarely would I binge in the morning. When it got to the later stages, I would end up doing that too, but rarely would that happen. So that structure kept me in good check in the morning. So it makes sense to have it at night. So that's one of the things that I did. The other is, especially nowadays, is to be off social media and to remove the food delivery apps. This is like really crucial, especially when it comes to nighttime, where we've had the day. And what do we do at night? Once the day's done, what do? We think. Before we go to bed, we sit. We're in silence. So this naturally is going to trigger thoughts, reflection, yeah? And our body might communicate, oh, maybe this food or this food. If we are on social media, and specifically we've been binging, yeah, it's natural that we would have looked at foods. It's what happened to me. Like, I would look at foods. So removing that at night is so crucial. Now, that is going to be hard for a lot of you. It was hard for me. And even now at times, like I do stuff on the business, which is not good. So that's something that it's not food, but it's business for me now. So I've been practicing to remove that. I'm not perfect with that, practicing removing that. But when it comes to binging at night, removing social media, at least like an hour, like before you go to bed. You've got to have some circuit breaker with there that you're off social media. It's going to be so crucial to be off that, because what's going to happen is, and what happened to me is, when you're on social media, it's like a rabbit hole. So one thing's going to lead to another, it's going to lead to another, it's going to lead to another. So eventually you're going to get down the rabbit hole of food, because it's going to be on your mind and you're going to search for it. And that is what I did. So removing that element is going to stop that thought to be provoked and for that rabbit hole to be going down. And another big one, in addition to these two, the removal of social media and the removal of food delivery apps. It is an absolute killer when you are binging at night. It is something that plagued me for so many years. And so I'll explain the process here. You've had a big day, stressed, a bit of stress, let's say, whether it be work, you come home, you're doing maybe a little bit of exercise or doing some reading or something, and then you end up getting to dinner, you have your dinner, and then 2 hours, you end up starting to transition to go to bed. And then the thought comes of food. Oh, the pizza that I was having. The burger, the fries, the ice cream, the whatever it is that's triggering you. And you get your phone and you click on that app. If you do that, it's almost already game over. Even if you've removed it, yeah. If you're in the App Store, say I've got an iPhone. So if you're in the App Store and you click in and you see that Uber Eats, Deliveroo, whatever now, I haven't done delivery for the longest time. So whatever that is, it was Uber Eats for me, majority of the time. And you download that, it's almost game over, because what happens then is you start to go down the rabbit hole of food and, okay, what food am I going to have tonight? Or maybe I have this, and you start to build out the menu that you're going to have. And maybe you're going to have it at multiple different places, yeah? Like you're going to have this and this, or maybe you look at one, like I used to look at one burger place so many times, and I would curate like the perfect menu that I would have for delivery. And a lot of the time it'd come to me and it's going to be warm. It wouldn't even be hot anymore, but whatever. So removing that is going to be absolutely crucial, because if you're doing that, it's only going to trigger that spiral. And once you start to think about it, you're not going to be able to stop it. Well, it's rare to be able to stop it once you start. So we don't want to go into that void. The 6th point, and this doesn't really get touched on much on social media, I see. It's more so when I'm talking with people one-on-one. And that one is loneliness. So when the best way I can explain this is, if you look on dating apps, yeah, and you look at the most frequent time people that are on dating apps, you're going to see a window of like 9 to like 10 or like 8:30 to 9:30, like somewhere in that window, it's going to peak dramatically. One of the biggest reasons why that's the case is that people feel lonely. And I have felt lonely. Like, I remember when I was in the depth of my addiction to food, I was at night, and one of the things that brought me a lot of comfort that didn't work anymore is that I would watch a Disney movie and I would sit there and I'd watch the Disney movie, and I thought that if I did that I would stop binging, and it didn't end up happening. It was very sad to me because it brought me a lot of comfort as a child to do that. And when I started to think of ways that I could break my food addiction and this binging cycle that I was on for so many years, it was one of the things that I did, and it just didn't work. So when those feelings of loneliness come up, maybe we've gone through a breakup, okay? Maybe as a result of living this lifestyle, we haven't found many people living it. This normal. Maybe we haven't found the right partner for years. Yeah, and we've spent a lot of our time being single. So maybe we still are in a relationship, but maybe we're not in a relationship that we even want to be in. And or another reason, we're so disconnected from the relationship we're in with the partner for a number of reasons, yeah? I'm not going to go into relationship things, but potentially for a number of reasons that we feel lonely. The feelings of loneliness are normal. We all feel them. Things to put in place that help with that is one, when feelings of loneliness come up, recognize it's okay. It's like boredom. It's like these things that come up, they can be normal. They are normal things that come up. So recognize that it's normal. And then the second piece is going to be, if you're feeling disconnected or you're feeling lonely, one thing that I recommend is definitely pray on it. Be connected with a power greater than yourself. It's going to help. If we're feeling disconnected and lonely, to connect with a power greater than ourselves to help with that. Certainly what I do, I pray. I pray on these feelings. Another thing, if you're feeling lonely, talk with a friend. It's going to help. Absolutely. We all need good friends. Talk with a family member. Those initial intense feelings of loneliness, and especially at the start when transitioning. Talk to someone, connect with someone, be part of a community. Oh my goodness, that is a great thing to be doing. Absolutely, it's what I have done. If you are feeling lonely and disconnected, then the solution to that is connection. Yeah? Look, there could be underlying things to that, but just generally, have some more connection in your life. And another big thing is people get pets because they feel lonely. And pets are also a great thing. I'm not saying don't get pets. Yeah, pets are a great thing. When you're going through stuff, having a dog or a cat, that helps. It definitely helps. So the biggest thing that I can say is being a part of a community. When you're part of a community, you're part of a group, it is going to connect you. And especially with living a life that's contrary to a lot of how people think and act, being vegan, raw vegan, being part of a community that connects and build those relationships and fellowship is what's going to help in those times that we're having those feelings. It has helped me massively, and it's something that I absolutely recommend. And the last final point that I would like to make is this is going to take time. It is not an overnight matter. Yeah? If you've been binging at night for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, how can you expect the shift in your character, in the behaviors, in your identity, in the level of surrender to happen overnight? And it's likely that it has been my experience that these things take time to shift. For me, it took a long time to shift. But I focused on the actions that I was taking. And one day, getting another day, focusing in the day and getting another day on these actions that I took and moving the needle forward one more day. And I did it one more day and one more day and one more day. And before you know it, after 30 days, after 60 days, after 90 days, you've started to build a solid foundation, a very solid foundation that now it's a part of who you are. And that is called a transformation, a self-transformation. You could get that from a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, because when you transform and transcend yourself, that is when you truly change. And all these actions, these take time. Yes, it can happen quicker than others. My experience, it happens slowly over time. When it happens though, it is incredible, because there was moments where I'm like, it has been a week and I haven't even thought about food. That was unheard of for me. I would constantly think about food. It was like a couple of days. I hadn't binged at night. Amazing. When I got to a month, I was like, what's happening here? The biggest was when I got to 3 months. When I got to 3 months, I was feeling, and then I was so grateful and I was so happy because I had destroyed my life for such a long time that getting to this point, I was elated. So recognize that it's going to take time. Accept that. Be very comfortable with that. And it might shift sooner than you think, but generally speaking, it's going to take longer than you think, because that has been my experience, and it's been a lot of the experience of the people that I've worked with. Those are the 7 key points, strategies, ideas that I wanted to share with you today. And I can guarantee if you do these things and you seek some support with these things and you implement these things in your life, it will absolutely change your life as it has done for me. So thank you and take care.